What's up, folks? Welcome back to TacticalTortoise. My name is Trevi, and welcome to another installment of the best armies in Warhammer 40k. This is the video series where every week we go through undefeated lists from GT plus level events throughout the world. This episode is for the weekend of December 1st through December 3rd, and this was a huge weekend as we saw multiple major and higher level events, including Warzone Atlanta, Mary Slanesh at the major level, and moving on to the super major level, we also saw the Leicester super major. In terms of the metagame breakdown, we see Aeldari continuing to reign relatively supreme over the Warhammer 40k metagame. They had 4 undefeated lists, including 2 lists at the Wasted Potential event. However, they are being slowly eclipsed by Adeptus Astartes, who, if we break down all of their different sub-factions, had a grand total of 8 undefeated lists this weekend. Adeptus Astartes proper, meaning all of the Codex Space Marine chapters, including some results from Ultramarines in specific, took down the Sword and Board GT Winter Warzone Incursion event and Mary Slanesh. Black Templars took down Coastal Assault, Hero-Con, and Felix Exterminatus, and Dark Angels going undefeated at the Iron Cage. Chaos Space Marines are also continuing to see success with 3 undefeated results at the Leicester Super Major. They did take that one down, and that's the list we're going to be talking about in this episode. The Perth GT and the Eye of Terror, where they had 1 result, X0-1. The cult-specific Chaos Space Marine armies saw some success as well, with World Eaters going undefeated at Eye of Terror and the Southwest Shootout. Thousand Suns also had some top placing results. These weren't necessarily X and O results, but we saw Thousand Suns win the Winter Slaughter GT. That was a 6-round GT with a 5-round record and the highest tiebreakers, as well as go undefeated at Southwest Shootout with an X0-1 record. Death Guard also went undefeated at Mary Slanesh as well, and to round out the Chaos Super faction, we also have a result from Chaos Knights at Battle for Serenity. Moving on to other factions, we saw a couple with a single undefeated result, including Orks at Evzaro Galatorna, Adeptus Mechanicus at the Iron Cage, Grey Knights and Tau Empire both at the Warhound GT, and last but certainly not least, Tyranids at Felix Exterminatus. And that moves us on to army lists, so let's discuss. Starting with Aeldari, we'll talk about the winning list from Warzone Atlanta, played by Z Martin. This player was able to go 7-0 with this list. This player was able to go 7-0 with a very interesting variety of Eldar. We've been seeing Eldar for the last couple of months at the top of this list, but generally speaking, the armies have been relatively cookie cutter. But this one is a little different. Z was running an Autarch, that is a foot Autarch, not an Autarch Wade Leaper, as we would normally expect, a Farseer Skyrunner, Fugue the Fire Lord, as well as Karandras and a Solitaire. That was backed up by 10 Storm Guardians, with 2 fusion guns inside, potentially for the Autarch to join into. We saw 3 Falcons in the list, alongside 3 units of Fire Dragons, 2 units of 5 Rangers, 2 units of Striking Scorpions, 3 support weapon D-cannon platforms to add a little bit of high damage indirect fire, as well as a unit of Swooping Hawks for support. This is a super interesting list, very different than any of the other Eldar lists that we've seen before, running mass numbers of small Aspect Warrior units in order to make best use of unparalleled foresight and trade up with its opponent's units. Super cool to see a slightly different variety of Eldar go undefeated this week, rather than the standard styles of lists that are running Wraithguard or Avatars that we typically see. And that moves us on to Adeptus Astartes. And we saw a couple different varieties of classic Space Marines go undefeated, including an Ultramarines Vanguard Onslaught, as well as the list that we're going to be talking about today, Dan Ahern from the Winter Warzone. This was a Salamander's Firestorm Assault Force, a little bit different than the armies we will typically see, which are either those John Lennon-style Vanguard Onslaughts that I've talked about extensively in previous videos and in my video breaking down the World Championships of Warhammer, and the Ironstorm Assault Forces that we are also seeing in basically every chapter. This list was running Vulcan Heston, as well as a Gravis Captain with Forged in Battle, and an Eradicator Squad. The list brought 3 Inceptor Squads, all of 3 members, 2 with Plasma Exterminators and 1 with Assault Bolters, 3 Infernus Squads, including 1 of 10 and 2 of 5, 1 Scout Squad, as well as a Brutalis Dreadnought, 1 Drop Pod for the large Infernus Squad to join into, a Land Raider Redeemer, Storm Raven Gunship, and Whirlwind. This list is both combining the short-range focus of the detachment that gives you an additional strength bonus when you're near enemy units, but also focuses on the transport synergies that the Firestorm detachment has. It has 2 big heavy transports, including the Stormraven gunship and the Land Raider Redeemer. The Brutalis Dreadnought can be brought alongside the Stormraven gunship, and its occupants can disembark in response to incoming shooting. You could potentially be putting the Eradicator squad in either one of these transports and using them to reactive fire with Burning Vengeance onto something that is silly enough to attack you. We then have all of the synergies between the Infernus squads and Vulcan Heston to give rerolls and potentially devastating wounds to flamer weapons, to give rerolls, and with the stratagem from the detachment, devastating wounds to flamer weapons to do massive damage with these little units of Marines. That moves us on to the next best performing Space Marine chapter, Black Templars, who are able to take down the Coastal Assault GT. At this event, Cliff Nelson went undefeated with a Righteous Crusaders detachment, a little bit different than, again, the Ironstorm detachments that we've been seeing from the faction previously. Righteous Crusaders is the Black Templar specific detachment after all. This one was focused on a trio of characters, High Marshal Helbrecht, as well as Captain Grimaldus, and a lieutenant with 10 Hauser's Bones. We had 2 big, huge Primaris Crusader squads, 20 models apiece, to make use of the insane damage combo that they have available to them. I have a whole video talking about these squads and exactly why they are so ridiculously dangerous, so you can go check that out if you want to learn more. We also had 1 unit of 5 Assault Intercessors with jump packs, 2 Gladiator Lancers, 1 unit of Inceptors for support, 2 Redemptor Dreadnoughts to make up the midline of the table, 1 Scout Squad, a Calidus and Vindicare Assassins. Chaplain Grimaldus is a big boon to one of these Crusader squads, especially because he gives them the ability to advance and charge, which Rice's Crusaders don't have, but we'll probably see High Marshal Helbrecht and the Lieutenant attached into the other unit in order to supercharge their attacks similarly. That second unit doesn't have the same level of speed or survivability as Grimaldus' unit, but it can still do some pretty insane damage thanks to High Marshal Helbrecht's improved critical hits. Last but certainly not least for Space Marines, we saw Kit Smith Hanna go 5-0 with Dark Angels at the Iron Cage. While we spent the rest of this section skirting around Ironstorm Spearhead, it's finally time to talk about them proper. This list was a relatively fast and maneuverable style of Ironstorm Spearhead, using a bunch of the Dark Angel specific speeder units in order to add some much needed maneuverability to the army archetype. This was running Azrael as well as a Ravenwing Talonmaster with Master of the Machine War to allow advance and charge and fall back and charge for both himself and other vehicles in nearby. It had 2 Tech Marines. One of them with Target Augury Web and the other with Adept of the Omnissiah for the triumvirate of powerful enhancements available to the Ironstorm Spearhead. In terms of infantry, we only had a single Inceptor and a Scout Squad, and the rest of the list was made up by vehicles, including 1 Ballistus Dreadnought, 1 Dark Shroud, 1 Landspeeder Vengeance, 3 Redemptor Dreadnoughts with Macroplasma, a Stormspeeder Thunderstrike, as well as a Stormraven gunship. One of the big downsides of the Ironstorm Spearhead is that while it does do insane damage, typical versions are relatively unmaneuverable. And while Master of the Machine War can make up for that a little bit, generally you're still going to be moving large, slow vehicle models around the table and trying to get line of sight with them, which is a little bit tough. However, the inclusions of the Land Speeders, Storm Speeders, and Stormraven Gunship really help alleviate that normal weakness that Ironstorm Spearhead typically has. Also, shout out to the Singleton Azrael over here. He's just going to be generating you command points the entire time, but he doesn't necessarily have anything to join into, so he's not buffing his unit up, he's just all by himself today. Now that moves us on to the biggest event of the weekend, the Leicester Super Major, where Will Whitaker went 7-0 after making it to the top cut, going 5-0 in the first 5 rounds of the event. Will was playing a Chaos Space Marine list, and I think we're going to be seeing a lot of things that we've seen in previous Chaos Space Marine lists, so not too much exciting to talk about here. This list was running 3 Undivided Chaos Lords, 3 Dark Communes, 3 units of 16 Accursed Cultists, 3 units of 5 Chosen. Those guys were embarked into 2 Chaos Rhinos. We also had 2 Forge Fiends, and Celeste, and 2 units of Nurglings. This is a very similar list to the list that Manny Chima took to the World Championships of Warhammer and took down the event with. I have a whole video describing exactly how that list is powerful. This one, however, drops a couple of additional inclusions, including one of the Chaos Rhinos and the Legionaries for a second Forge Fiend and Celeste. Celeste adds a little bit of utility to the army. It's a very difficult They're a very difficult to destroy character since they can respond themselves on a 2+. Plus, being a demon, they can deep strike, so they can get into awkward parts of your opponent's deployment zone if you need them for any particular secondaries, and are generally very useful. So with that, let's move on to some of the other Chaos armies that went undefeated this weekend, including John Camacho's World Eaters from the Southwest Shootout. This list was running Angron, Lord Invocatus, a Demon Prince with the Helm of Brazen Ire, as well as a Demon Prince with Favor of Khorne, and a Master of Executions with the Berserker Glaive. Interesting to see multiple ground-pounding Demon Princes in this list, but this list was focused heavily on Jackals, and Jackals benefit enormously from the ground-pounding Demon Prince's 4+ Invulnerable Save Aura, making a T3 unit with relatively poor defensive stats actually incredibly sticky to kill. The list was then running mass numbers of infantry, including 80 Jackals, 4 units of 20, alongside 10 Khorne Berserkers and another unit of 5 Khorne Berserkers. This list is absolutely nuts. I've actually streamed the Jackal spam list on the table before. Jackals, while they don't do an insane amount of damage, they can be buffed up by World Eater's abilities to help out their damage output a little bit. But generally speaking, they are fast, impossibly hard to kill thanks to their Feel No Pain and 4+ Invulnerable Save. And having charge bonuses and mass OC2 are incredibly good at dominating the center of the table. That pulls a lot of focus from characters in Angron, who can then deliver their units of Khorne Berserkers, and obviously Angron himself, and actually deal the finishing blow to many enemy units. If you don't have the attack volume to deal with units like these Jackals, these lists are incredibly difficult to deal with. And pretty quickly, you'll see all of your objectives get locked out from under you. Moving on, we will talk about the exact opposite of World Eaters in Thousand Suns, which saw an event win this weekend at the Winter Slaughter. This list was piloted by Tom Deem, who you might know if you are a member of the Tactical Tortoise Discord, as Niv. Tom actually has a write-up of his games over in the Discord in the Thousand Suns channel, so if you want to go check that out, you can do so in the link in my link tree, which you can find in the video description. This list was running an Exalted Sorcerer on a disc with the Umbralific Crystal to allow him to teleport, 2 Infernal Masters, one of them with the Arcane Vortex to buff his psychic weapons, a Thousand Suns Sorcerer with the Lord of Forbidden Lore. This guy has an 18-inch load operative style ability for his unit, and the Lord of Forbidden Lore is an important enhancement for a Thousand Suns army to allow that guy to duplicate his rituals once they're performed already in the turn, so he can keep them safe with his own, so he can keep his rubric unit safe and keep that ability alive for his unit. We also had Ahriman on a disc of Tzeentch, alongside Magnus the Red, 5 units of 5 rubric marines. I'm not sure what these are equipped with, because it isn't listed on the list itself, but I have a sneaking suspicion that they had Soul Reaper cannons and flamers, alongside 10 cultists, a unit of Zangor Enlightened for some trash units to grab secondary objectives with, a Thousand Suns Rhino to carry some of the rubric marines into battle, the Changeling, and last but certainly not least, a Mutalith Vortex Beast. The Vortex Beast is a pretty interesting inclusion. For 165 points, you get an incredibly difficult to kill body. He can enhance the power of your rituals, potentially giving you some offensive push with early long-range Doom Bolts or Twists of Fate, and itself has an incredibly potent gun that, while being relatively inconsistent, your opponent still has to keep in mind and play around. Now, last but certainly not least, for the Chaos Space Marine factions, we saw Timothy Grant go 6-0 at the Marius Laneshmus event, running a Plague Company including Mortarion, who we've been seeing kind of sent out of lists more recently for favor of more infantry characters. However, we did see a lot of infantry characters still in the list, including 3 Biologus Putrefiers, a Tallyman, and Typhus. Those were supporting 50 Plague Marines, 4 units of 10 and 2 units of 5, those being carried around in 5 Death Guard Rhinos, alongside 20 Poxwalkers, likely for Typhus to join into and use his ability to respawn, and 3 units of Nurglings for support. A very similar Rhino Rush list to the Plague Marine focus lists that we've been seeing more recently. Interesting to see the inclusions of Mortarion and the Poxwalkers in this one. It's nice to see some of those classic Death Guard units make a reappearance, and this list has a lot of offensive power, as opposed to the Plague Burst Crawlers and the more resilient tanks that we typically see in Death Guard lists more recently. Now, rounding out the Chaos Super faction, we also saw a result from Chaos Knights. Matthew Ali went 5-0 with them at the Battle for Serenity. Matthew's list was a relatively standard War Dog focused list. This one is shooing all demon and allied units for more War Dogs. The list began with a Knight Despoiler. Running 2 Despoiler battle cannons as well as Aura of Terror. Nice to see a big knight on the table to support the little ones, alongside 5 War Dog Brigands and 5 Carnivores. The Despoiler gives a lot of backline shooting power to the army, which allows the War Dogs to push more aggressively forward, not necessarily playing the ranged game that we oftentimes see Brigands do, and that allows them to use their utilize their high OC value to lock in objectives. There are a lot of armies as well that can deal with the War Dog stat line, but can't necessarily do so and also deal with the stat line of the Despoiler, and that allows the Despoiler to plug away from the back of the table for the entirety of the game. Now moving on to the factions with only a single result. Richard Ivani took down the Evzaro Galatorna event 5-0-1 with 1 tie on his record. Richard was playing Orks. Richard was playing a very Beast Snaga focused variety of Orks, including a Warboss, Beast Boss on Squigosaur with the Head Wampus Killchoppa for devastating wounds, Mazrog Scragbad, a Knob on Smasha Squig, a Warboss with a Super Cyborg body, as well as a Mega Armor Warboss with Follow Me Lads. We had a unit of Beast Snaga Boys for the Beast Boss to join into, alongside 2 trucks to carry those guys into battle, and a Battle Wagon. 2 units of Gretchens followed up the rear, alongside 5 Mega Knobs for the Mega Armor Warboss to join into, a unit of Knobs for the Standard Warboss to join into, and 2 units of Squighog Boys, alongside 2 units of Storm Boys and Warbikers to act as utility and support. Now, also from the Iron Cage GT, we saw a result from Adeptus Mechanicus, where Brand Townsend took the faction to a 5-0 record. Didn't quite take the win of the event. That was Kid Smith Hannah's win with Dark Angels, but did end up going undefeated. Brad's list was running 3 Tech Priest Manipuli, one of them with Excoriating Emanation, one with the Omni Sterilizer, and one with Master Annihilator. Forming the battle line to turn on the battle line synergies of the faction were 2 units of 10 Skitarii Vanguard and 1 Dune Rider, potentially to carry them into battle. We had 2 Iron Strider Ballistari, 3 units of 6 Cataphren Breachers, alongside 3 units of 3 Cerberus Raiders, and 3 units of 2, interestingly, Sidonian Dragoons. Well, hopefully we do see a little bit more variety from the faction now that their codex is being released. It is nice to see Adeptus Mechanicus still at the undefeated table, even if it is with the standard style of breacher spam list that we've typically seen from Adeptus Mechanicus in the past. If you are engaging in a gunfight with these guys, they are still going to be relatively strong, so they are a force to be reckoned with, even if we haven't seen them go undefeated too often. Now that moves us on to the Warhound GT, where we saw 2 pretty interesting other factions go 5-0. Both Grey Knights and Tau Empire. Starting with Grey Knights, Chase Campbell was able to take the faction to a 5-0 record, running 2 Brotherhood Librarians, one of them with the Sigil of Exogens, Castellan Crow in a big unit of Purifiers. They were leading a Brotherhood Terminator squad, a Strike squad, 1 Land Raider Redeemer, as well as a Storm Raven gunship. Interesting to see the transports on the table for Grey Knights. We don't often see those things because they don't synergize very well with the faction's teleport assaults, but they do give you the ability to start more of the army on the table, which can be pretty useful, especially when making charges. We also then saw 1 5-man Interceptor squad, a 5-man Paladin squad, and a Calidus Assassin. And that moves us on to Tau Empire, which Jason McKenzie took to a 5-0 record at the same event. Jason's list was running a Cadre Fireblade, Commander Firesight, as well as a Cold Star Commander Battlesuit with Exemplar of the Kauyon to turn on their Kauyon buffs a turn early. We had 1 Breacher team and a Devilfish for that Cadre Fireblade to join into, alongside 2 units of Crisis Battlesuits, 1 of 3 and 1 of 6. The 6 model Battlesuit is likely for the Cold Star Commander to join into. These were all taking a mix of Plasma Rifles and Cyclic Ion Blasters, so they weren't entirely focused on the hazardous weapons, which could cause problems for the Battlesuit teams. We also saw a Ghost Keel Battlesuit alongside 2 units of Crude Hounds, a Crutox, and 10 Crude Carnivores to add some scouting forward operators to the list. 3 individual Piranhas for the same reason, alongside 2 Skyray gunships, 1 stealth battlesuit unit, and 3 units of 2 Tetras. This list is incredibly scoring focused. With all the Crute and Piranhas, we have tons and tons of scout and forward operators, which are able to score points early, so that you can so the army can delay until the Crisis Battlesuits arrive to finally scour the board clean of their opponents. Now that brings us to the last faction we're going to discuss today, Tyranids, who went 5-0 at the Felice Exterminatus event. Ryan Verbeck took the faction to an undefeated record and actually won the event with an Invasion Fleet style of list. This list was running a Broodlord, Deathleaper, a Neurotyrant, and Old One-Eye, alongside 2 units of Gargoyles. The list was very damage output focused, especially in melee, including 2. The list was the list was incredibly focused on dealing lots of damage, especially in melee, including 2 Carnifexes. These Carnifexes were loaded out with Death Spitters, but with Old One Eye's ability, they get full rerolls both in the fight and shooting phases, meaning that Old One Eye can carry the team with his incredible melee stat line, and the Carnifexes can help support him in the shooting phase. We also then saw 3 Exocrines, 10 Gene Stealers for the Broodlord to join into, 2 Lictors and 3 Neurolictors to act as forward operators, 1 Maleceptor to anchor the midboard, and 2 individual Pyrovores. Very cool to see the Carnifexes on the table. This list is incredibly lethal, especially with the Gene Stealers and those Carnifexes in there. It has a lot of access to pretty strong melee profiles that Tyranids don't normally have access to, but obviously trades some resilience for that. But altogether, a very technical list that Ryan was able to take to that undefeated record. And that is all of the best armies in Warhammer 40k for this week. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of the video. Thanks as well to everybody who supports the channel, either over on Patreon at patreon.com/TacticalTortoise, YouTube channel members, and Twitch subscribers. All you people are amazing. And I love you. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.